chronologically, in Prabhupada's development of ISKCON, I remember very clearly, Prabhupada indicated that those temples that are well established in the urban situations, because that's where the preaching was taking place, all these first 5, then to go the next step. Like Rabindra Srila was saying, identify the next step, and identify the next step, and identify the next step. So the next step in this chronological sequence was establishing communities that, in his language, later on at least, was simple living, high thinking. His language in 1966, to bring the members close together for the purpose of teaching simpler and more natural way of life. A simpler and more natural way of life. So in Gita Nagari, Labor Day weekend, this is the topic that we're going to be discussing. It's given a different name, Exploring Varnashram. But when Prabhupada spoke, during the concluding era of his leading directly, physically, by his presence, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, he started speaking about Varnashram, and it was very clearly, those of you that come will hear, but very clearly was directed towards living from what is produced from the land and from the cows. Although Varnashram indicates the social structure, his emphasis was this principle. It's a simpler and more natural way of life. So we had a plan of who would be the presenter, and some crisis came up in his family, so he couldn't come. Yesterday afternoon, I made a call to Dhruva, who, by grace of God, somebody answered the phone. And it was Dhruva. And on a dime, he said, sure. And I said, are you sure? You're sure? Yeah, we'll be there. So Dhruva and Parijata inherited the New York farm. That's how it started. It was known that way. And have done amazing, triple amazing service to make it into what it could be, should be, will be, and it's still a lot of work to do. And when you go visit Gita Nagari, you're lucky if you see either of them, just like a flash passing by, running from one thing to the next thing. Very, very active, very creative, very innovative, very dedicated leaders of one such project as we're going to hear Prabhupada wanted established as a principal purpose of ISKCON. So Dhruva Maharaj and Parijata, please take it away. Hare Krishna. You can have a stand or just hold the mic as you wish. On chairs or on cushions? It's fine.
So Hare Krishna, everybody. Thank you. We feel very fortunate to be here, to have all of you as association. Of course, there was mixed feelings leaving the farm. When I parked the car, we had to lock it, make sure that nothing was visible that could be taken. Somehow,
Welcome to New York.
Yes. Of course, in the farm, we leave the keys in the ignition, so a bit of a contrast to the big city. But nevertheless, we're excited to be here today. We're going to try to share a few things regarding this purpose number 6 that Prabhupada had written, 7 purposes of ISKCON. So to bring the members closer together for the purpose of teaching a simpler and more natural way of life. So we'll share just a few thoughts and realizations that we've been having. So our understanding is bring the members closer together. That means having a community by design. So there's different types of community. Sometimes, we find that there's community by default, just a group of people living in the same vicinity, but there's no real design around the community. They don't share common values and things like that. But here we're talking about bringing the members of the society closer together, so a community by design. So Prabhupada mentions the word teaching, so of course it was very deliberate, showing, living and being. So sometimes we're reminded of the word acharya, someone who teaches by example. So Prabhupada wanted something in a very practical teaching way, not just textbook, classroom like university is teaching, but practical application of the teaching as well. Simpler, meaning our understanding is being voluntarily content. So when we start living this life of simple living, high thinking, we should be voluntarily content, not constantly thinking, I want to go and live in New York City as opposed to Gita Nagari and things like that. So a simpler way of life and a more natural way of life. So we'll go more into detail about that point later on, but of course if we examine Prabhupada's lectures, discussions, cows and land are the center of our existence. So we'll go more into that. So here's a room conversation with Srila Prabhupada. I think it was 8th October 1977. And Prabhupada basically gave the definition very, very simply. Also, live very simple life and you save time for chanting Hare Krishna. So this seems to be the crux of the matter, the essence of what we're trying to do. When Prabhupada speaks about simple living, high thinking, essentially we want to try to see how to minimize, the hustle and bustle, fast-paced life that we're leading for the main purpose of chanting Hare Krishna. So that is my desire. Don't waste time for bodily comforts. You got this body, you have to eat something. You have to cover yourself. So produce your own food and own cloth. Don't waste time for luxury and chant Hare Krishna. So what's going on in society today? What's the reality? So this was the ideal, and we can see, if we think about practical examples, what's happening in the Middle East, what's happening with ISIS. So many things are going on in the world right now, what's happening in North Korea. So many other things are happening at other parts of the world, but sometimes we may think that it's never going to happen to us. So, of course, there's many aspects of what's going on in society today, and we'll go through a few aspects. So, how many of you have seen this slide before? This is from the internet. It's the FDA product recall list. So here there's a few items. Sunflower seed butter that was recalled because of listeria, and that was on the 4th of June. What's the date today? 5th? 6th? So every day there's at least 7 to 10 and maybe more. If you just go to the FDA website, you'll be able to get to this page very, very quickly. But basically it's a list of items that the stores carry that have been recalled. So we all, go and shop in the stores. Sunflower seeds, trail mix, quinoa, granola bars, so many items. And of course if you click on the actual item itself, it goes into more detail about the actual problem, which actual products, the UPC codes that are affected. So we all, of course, just go to the store, purchase items. If you go to the next page, there's so many items. There's food items.
I did the previous page.
Oh,
Yeah, I did both.
you did both. Okay, sorry. So there's so many organic frozen foods, traditional fruits and vegetables.
Organic frozen?
Yes, so
Yeah.
even the organic is not safe from listeria. The next page, where's that? Cliff Bar, yeah, on the top. Cliff Bar, one of those healthy, nutritious, very expensive Cliff Bars. How many of you have had that before?
How many of you have it again?
Listeria. So this is the reality of our food system today. It seems to be always in hindsight that whatever shows up in the store, somehow the FDA gets, wind of what's going on. They do testing on a random basis, and then it's always in hindsight that they put this list out there. So whenever we go shopping, before we consume it, we should quickly go and check what's going on, because how else to know? The store's not going to call us and say, yesterday you bought a Cliff Bar and it's contaminated with listeria. So I don't know what the solution is, what the actual solution is, but I definitely keep an eye on this list and see what's being contaminated. There's another one, there was one nice item, I think it was the previous page, sorry. Cheese, bread, cookies and cream dessert. So what's the problem with that one? Undeclared eggs. So sometimes, I know I used to go to the store and check, I'm hungry today and I didn't get prasadam and temple's far away. Let's quickly check the ingredients. Oh, no eggs. That's good. But somehow, sometimes it doesn't get on the label.
Undeclared fish.
Yeah. So this is just 2 pages of the, it's just, I think, 2 or 3 days, 3rd of the 6th. There's so many items. So our food system definitely is in some jeopardy. Next. So here's another problem with today's society. There's economic crisis on so many fronts. Bankruptcies affecting multi-billion-dollar companies. I was shocked. I just Googled top 10 bankruptcies. And it came up with so many multi-billion-dollar companies, with assets ranging from $364 billion to 30 and 40. I think Chrysler and GM had 30 and 40 billion dollar assets. So I don't know if any investment bankers are here. We're always trying to see how much our company's worth, what their assets are worth, and you think, well, if they've got assets worth $300 billion, the chances of them going bankrupt is very, very slim. There's always this calculation, there's always this projection, but if we Google that list, we'll be able to see that nobody's exempt. The city of Detroit, I think it was last year, they went bankrupt. Who would have thought? A few years ago. Who would have thought, a big city like Detroit would go bankrupt? Of course, Chrysler and GM. Who would have thought? What about Greece? The country of Greece. They also filed for bankruptcy. There's of course been a bailout plan and so many things. So much of economic crisis in the world. How many of you remember this? 2012. I remember I came to do a milk delivery during this time, and I just couldn't believe it, that you couldn't get gas if your last digit on your license plate ended in an odd or even number. You had to come the next day. I was in complete shock. Is this happening for real, or is it a joke? Parking lot in New Jersey, familiar sights. So sometimes we think that it might not happen to us. There's no way it's going to happen. Maybe even in Pennsylvania, it might not happen. It might not happen, and we keep hope against hope. So when I was driving back to the farm, when that flooding was happening here in this location, I saw the Amish people. They were busy plowing the field. The rain had subsided a little bit, and it was good enough for them to get in and plow. And I was thinking, wow, just see how amazing these people are, that they're living so simply, and whilst everybody else is waiting for gas for their tractors because there was no fuel available. And it wasn't that fuel had run out, it was that the refineries were flooded and the trucks couldn't get in to go and fill the gasoline to deliver it to the gas stations. That was the problem. So it wasn't something so major that we ran out of oil, but it was just a simple thing that the refineries got flooded and practically brought this eastern corridor to a standstill. So what does this all mean? Let us all move to the farms tomorrow. We're waiting. Please give us a call, give us some advance notice, and we'll book your room and we'll allocate you some nice service according to your propensity. How does that sound? So no, of course not. So here's some points. Prabhupada says it, of course, so eloquently. He talks about Krishna in his natural life. He's a village boy in Vrindavan. Vrindavan is a village. There's no factory. There's no motor car. There's no big skyscrapers. Of course, things are changing a little bit. But Krishna manifests his pastimes in the cities of Mathura and Dwarka. But Krishna, the son of Nanda Maharaj, never at any time leaves Vrindavan. So later on Prabhupada says, but it does not mean that we shall avoid city life or town life. Not. Everything, every place is Krishna's place. And so, like we had the other presentations as well, wherever we have our temples, it's Vaikuntha. Everywhere there should be Krishna consciousness. But if we keep ourselves within the village and properly organized, as Krishna personally showed us the example, he was personally taking care of the calves. So we understand that, generally there's so many administrators in the kingdom. Lord Indra has got his department, he's in charge of so many things. So there's 313 million demigods. But who's in charge of taking care of the cows? Somehow Krishna himself personally is taking care of the cows. So it must be an important service to take care of the cows. So somehow Krishna reserved this very important service for himself. So anyway, the point we're trying to get to, you'll see as the presentation flows, is that there is a need for both, for the farms and for the cities. We saw Prabhupada said, everybody shouldn't close shop in the cities and move to the farms. We should try to see how to simplify our lifestyles. And we have some thoughts and realizations. Parijata will share a few things. Yeah, I'll get to that. I think I can.
As long as it still works. Oh, I've seen this before.
Which one you do first?
That one. No, cities to farms. Okay. So this wonderful book written by, a compilation of lectures by Hare Krishna Devidasi, really summarizes, well not summarizes, puts together all of Prabhupada's lectures on farm communities and rural lifestyle. And from that I just kind of put a few thoughts together on how, and that's one message that we'd like to kind of communicate today, is how there can be more collaboration between cities and farms, rural communities and urban centers. Because all of us live in various localities, and Prabhupada made a very specific model that we can follow. And so what happens in the cities, and I think you just got to hit this. Okay, it's not working. Okay. So this is a summary of what Prabhupada says about how we can collaborate between cities and temples, and how our city temples and farm projects. He says that what is the role of city temples? They're actually staging grounds. And I think they're staging grounds for organizing, and we can say Varnashram Dharma, or we can say staging grounds for organizing communities in rural areas, because sometimes Varnashram Dharma may conjure all sorts of different images and controversies. So we'll just say for organizing rural communities. City temples provide a way out of unfavorable city environments by training devotees and directing them to Krishna-conscious farm communities, where they can find a wholesome occupation favorable to spiritual development. I always think it takes such great compassion to live in the city, because I've lived in the city, I've lived as a congregation member, I've lived in a temple, and I live on a farm. And I realize the compassion it takes to live in the city and push on the Sankirtan mission is not an ordinary thing. And I really have great respect for all of you who do that through your, maintaining your family situations, raising the children in, good education systems, pushing, distributing Krishna conscious literature, building the temples, establishing communities, Bhakti Vriksha groups. It takes compassion because you're always bombarded by various elements in the city, and those of us on the farm communities, we actually got it very easy, extremely easy. The mind is a little more prominent because it's so quiet, and the mode is so high in goodness that it it kind of forces one to uplift oneself, but it's very different. And so because of that, in terms of, can I just go to the first one? My train of thought, previous one. So Prabhupada says it is an unfavorable situation, but because of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Sankirtan mission, we make it favorable. And so, if you go down, how to fulfill the role, we establish temples and we distribute Krishna conscious literature. And what do we do in return, those of us who reside on farms? One devotee, when I first moved to Gita Nagari, he said, because I kind of got bewildered. I used to call Dhruva and say, did we go out? I came a year later and I said, did the devotees go on Harinam today? Did they distribute books? What did you guys do? And he said, none of that. I said, what did you do the whole day? And I would be bewildered, what is going on a farm? And then after I read this book, I understood that there's a different set of instructions for those who reside on the farm. So one devotee told me, who was a previous resident of Gita Nagari, he said that devotees spend so much of energy and they go out and they distribute these books, but an intelligent reader will ask, where is that lifestyle that you describe in these books? And that is where the farm communities and the rural communities become more relevant, that we have the service to be able to almost construct these communities. Prabhupada has given the infrastructure and the basics already through his instructions and through the previous devotees that have served and really pioneered these projects. And so as people become devotees, they brought to the communities and they can see this lifestyle described in the books. And so Prabhupada is very heavy. He says, modern society crushes the spiritual development. And that is there too, and that's why I have even more, I would like to put more emphasis on how much effort it all takes to preach in the cities. And so, but Prabhupada at the same time realizes, of course, we can't all go to the farms. It's not practical. We also, some of us are scared. We've lost so much contact. I've been a city slicker, also, and I just lost contact with just natural living. Maybe one trip to a botanical garden, once in 5 years or something is the closest to nature one gets. But you kind of get, and then you get afraid of the simplicity. And so he said, okay, what else can we do in the cities? And that's when he spoke about a Varnashram college, or we could say a college which teaches the different aspects of simple living, of rural lifestyle. But not only that, but also teaches character development and leadership and the training of brahmanas. And that's what our urban centers do. As soon as we come, we're adjusting our habits, we're becoming more Brahmanical, we are reading Prabhupada's books, we're increasing our knowledge. And so all bases are covered in that Prabhupada has set this wonderful model where in the urban centers there's a set of activities, in the rural centers a set of activities, and if that's clearly understood, there can be great collaboration. So we can move to then farms to cities. So if that's what city temples do, then what is our service to all of you? What are those living in rural communities? What is their service to all of you? And so we're going to quickly, I think we have to go more down probably. I think we have to go further down all the way. Yeah. We're going backwards, sorry. I did this in Prezi, and then my account kind of was over, so I just have it in PDF right now. So, what do we do? Prabhupada says to the Rupanuga in February 1976, every center must have a farm so we can get all milk and if possible vegetables, even fruit, flowers and milk. And every center, and that is how New York at the time, the devotees were very visionary, they followed Prabhupada's instructions like they do now too. And that's how Maharaj explained that the land in Gita Nagari was purchased and was called New Varshana. When Prabhupada visited, I'm told in 1976, he renamed it Gita Nagari, the place where the residents live according to the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. This is just some clips of Prabhupada's visit to Gita Nagari in 1976. There's some memories which we'll skip for now because of time, from Yadubar Prabhu's memory series about Prabhupada's visit to Gita Nagari. And so, again, like that we went over the slide, it does not mean that everyone has to move to the farms. We can move forward. But what we would like to share is, in terms of each of us, and most of us are here on the East Coast anyway, I didn't prepare too much on what the other farm communities are doing in the other states in the US. But I would really encourage anyone, and even if you're not living close to a farm community like Gita Nagari or anywhere else, is to support your local farmers. As Dhruva was mentioning, there's just so much adulterated boga out there. You just cannot tell what you're getting. And know your farmer, eat local, all those trends right now was actually, pioneered by Prabhupada decades ago. And now we given the opportunities to be able to collaborate in that farms can start to produce that, which means a lot of hard work, which means some dependence on the cities for infrastructure development. And then cities get the benefit of that, because then they get produce and dairy and flowers from the communities that actually can engage their talents in service to Krishna in that way. Another great way, and as the purpose suggests, is to bring people together closer to a more natural life, is to let farm communities serve you and host you as guests. And then, obviously then again allow the food production system to serve you. This is a quote by Srila Prabhupada, and that's why, as the Gita Nagari is one attempt to fulfill that. Many farms all over the world are doing it, notably the Hungarian project under Sri Ramaswamy probably the most successful ISKCON functional working farm, devotional community. Govardhan Eco Village, also based on very strong principles. Dhruva visited both. I just visited Govardhan Eco Village, only not Hungary. And really you see the devotees' efforts in action and how they're really following the teachings of Srila Prabhupada and really presenting this Krishna conscious lifestyle that Prabhupada is describing in his books. But the point Prabhupada makes is we know how to do it. So everyone is, even if you Google things like intentional communities and farm communities, a group of hippies are getting together somewhere, but they're having a very successful non-profit intentional community, doing all sorts of gardening and, huge community-supported agriculture, and somehow, we're kind of not quite at the cutting edge. Our model hasn't quite made it there. The closest CSA to us is a large farm that has 2,500 members, and that's half of what they produce. The other half goes to Wegmans for wholesale. We do not want to go too much into the markets, because when you go into markets, there's a whole lot of compliance. So we'd rather just serve the devotee communities and consume that among ourselves. We often joke about it in Pennsylvania. When you look at the Amish and how they function, we've not seen a poor Amish up to now. So there's a great amount of abundance and wealth in the land and the cows, huge. It's a matter of putting our efforts in and intelligence and organizing how to be able to cultivate that land and to serve the cows in the right consciousness so that all of their gifts can be distributed. So Prabhupada appeals. He says, therefore I'm asking so much here, farm, farm, farm. That is not my program, it's Krishna's program. Produce greenness everywhere, everywhere. And that was from a lecture in 1977 in Vrindavan. And so farm communities have such a diverse offering of services. And I just want to touch on a few that can be done, because people are looking towards sustainable living. They're looking towards organic food. They're looking towards a retreat facility. They're looking towards family-friendly destinations. And they're looking towards good food. So farms like Gita Nagari and other farms mainly provide food and dairy, vegetables, host tours. We've hosted everyone from the USDA because they were curious about how our values shape our operations, to groups of students, to interfaith groups. So there's a whole lot. And we are very happy and honored to host the Grihastha Vision team in their annual retreats. We host devotees in the various annual retreats also. We're going to host the first farm conference. The Minister of Cow Protection Agriculture, Kalakanta Prabhu, is launching a 4-continent farm conference. Wow. One in Asia, one in South America, one in North America, and one in Europe. Did I miss any? Yes. Yeah, Europe. The Europe one is in Italy. South America is in Colombia. Asia is in Govardhan Eco Village, and the one for North America is in Gita Nagari in August. And so at least we're starting the conversation to get to the point of how can we build this. We'll read some sections about Prabhupada. There's a lot of talk about Prabhupada's work, service. The work is still to be done. There's a lot of service regarding, progressing to this point, and there's many perspectives on that. So Sankirtan devotees, that's very important for us to be able to serve the city dwellers. It's actually our greatest joy. As I said, it takes a lot of endeavor to live in the city. I speak from practical realization. I just look at the folks in New York City and wow, I forget that it's like a different species of life. I mean, non-devotees out there, it's intense. And so Prabhupada says all of the Sankirtan devotees that live in the cities, all of the devotees that reside in the cities, please come and rest your weary bodies in spaces like Gita Nagari, where you read, chant. Prabhupada Swami has been hosting these wonderful retreats and lectures which are enlivening. It's a spiritual rejuvenation, different, the Grihastha Vision team. I think, we have now different Bhakti Vrikshas coming every weekend, which is a nice addition to that. I have the group from Virginia coming next weekend, about 70 of them. Group from New Jersey comes pretty often. And then, and so this becomes a real recharge. And no service. We used to do, come, I don't know, scrape the barn floors or help us clean the clutter, but not anymore. Because you already work so hard. You're serving your deities, you're getting the children ready for school, you're cooking, you're having to chant your japa, and you got to get to work, and then still clean the house and do whatever else you have to do, laundry, catch up. So we said, just come and not do any service. We'll figure the service part out. If you want to, you're always welcome. But at least you just come, you can read, chant, hear, take advantage of the wonderful natural setting. So eco-agri-tourism is part of that in terms of what farm communities offer. And so our message is also to show by example. And you know that famous, you may know that famous situation of Prabhupada in his last days received this beautiful handmade woolen shawl from Satyabhama, the wife of Paramananda, who was the leader of Gita Nagari at the time. And although all these devotees may be in different circumstances right now, all of their service remains to their eternal credit for what they have done. And she made this beautiful handmade shawl, which is still in a glass box at Prabhupada's feet in Gita Nagari. Come back, and Prabhupada placed it on his feet, and was very grateful when Tamal Krishna Maharaj presented that. And so we're showing by example. And so goal again is just to reiterate partnerships within cities and rural communities. So city dwellers and those that reside and serve in rural communities. You source your produce and dairy from your nearest farm community. You do the city outreach teams, bring your groups to farms, students, yoga schools, the young, the elderly, work colleagues, community members, and just retreat at our farms, like youth couples, students, families, bhakti rickshaw groups. So, message is farms need cities and cities need farms. And going back to the purpose again of bringing people together to bring them closer to a simpler and more natural life. Next. So, I would have loved to present, as Madangopa Prabhu did, a whole spectrum of internationally what farm communities are doing. It was a little spontaneous. So I thought, let's just talk about some efforts here and give you a kind of insight into what can be done on farms. And we'll use Gita Nagari as a case study, not because I want to push Gita Nagari, but that's what I know most about. And it's probably an example of some efforts towards this sixth purpose. So Prabhupada, we're very fortunate, Gita Nagari. He wrote a 23-page paper called The Conception of Gita Nagari in 1956, even before he came to the US. And it's been affectionately termed the Gita Nagari prophecy, and it's been adopted by the devotees of previous time, and they've come up with a master plan and so many other things. And so basically, he says, Gita Nagari, and this is any farm community, any urban center, you see yourselves as the main center for spiritual education and supreme culture. We really walk in, even as I used to travel to various countries, you just walk in and out, you're traveling between airports and whatever else, and you just walk into a temple. It's really walking to a space of supreme culture. That's just Prabhupada's potency of what he's given us. And in Gita Nagari it's strictly based, and everywhere else, on the teachings of Bhagavad Gita, hence the name. So there's no antagonism. People love that. Someone told me that, because I came straight from South Africa to Gita Nagari, so I always talk with people on what's going on in the cities. And they said there's one thing that if you can get right at Gita Nagari, and they gave us, I always look for feedback, I get a lot of feedback, but the one thing they said is people are searching for authenticity. If you can give them an authentic experience, then that is something that they really connect with. And people, because there's so much antagonism in material energy, so much of antagonism, and so many things that are artificial or superficial, or they've been let down. And so when they come to our farm communities, or even our urban centers, if we can give them an authentic experience and something that does not contain any antagonism, that is harmonizing, then they connect with that. And so that Prabhupada has spoken, those were his words in the prophecy. And we understand the relationship. And this is beautiful how he says it's the fatherhood of Godhead, the motherhood of nature, and the childhood of all living entities.
Oh, that's nice.
It's very beautifully put. That paper is just,
Where do you find that?
I can send you a copy. It's in the folio also.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it's very beautiful. And we will give, here it's instructed that the residents give protection to the cow. That is the order of Krishna. We cannot be so ungrateful that after drinking the milk, we kill our mother, and it gets heavy. A little bit of footage from his visit. So most people say, so what do you as Hare Krishnas believe as about sustainability? And we know the traditional model, because sustainability is a buzzword, but it's something that we as devotees, it's implicit in our lifestyle. However, we need to probably understand how to unpack that and present that to audiences when we ask this question. And so the traditional model of sustainability is, there's the social, the economic, and the environmental. Those three elements, if there's an intersection of those three, and they're all in balance, then something is considered, check, it's sustainable. And people have morphed the model, and they've added other elements. in a Krishna conscious context, and this is something we've adopted. Part of Devamita's form is Sustainability Science Institute, can't remember the SSI. They did a lot of research on this, and I pretty much adapted some of that content, and we came up with our model, which says that our process, bhakti in itself, is based on compassion. Compassion for all Krishna's parts and parcels. And in the farm communities, when I was reading, Prabhupada talks about simplicity and voluntary contentment, being happy with what we have. So contentment is very important. That means not greed, which leads to exploitation, not wanting more, hankering, lamenting, just contentment and simple. And then responsibility, meaning stewardship, taking care of the natural resources, of each other, of the infrastructure. And so we understand that the intersection of those three is a state of consciousness, and that is sustainability. And there are then some pillars to that. A worldview that should shape our actions so that there is some, walk behind the talk. Another pillar is happiness, which is that voluntary material simplicity. And then another pillar is around our food systems and community. And so in the Gita Nagari context, I often explain how the whole model of Krishna conscious Vedic farming, with the cow as central and the land as essential, is based on compassionate principles. Starting even with compassion with our own bodies. What we feed our bodies. How do we understand that the body is a temple of God, that the super soul resides in the body. And then having a simple life in terms of growing our own food, creating our own sources of sustenance, and then taking responsibility and accountability as being stewards, and then working on some very real technical plans to be able to maintain the land, the natural resources. And that's the last section on different organic systems plans and conservation plans, etc. And so typically most centers have this. You have your presiding deities, they're kind of the supreme benefactor beneficiaries. You have devotees, your community. You need some sort of economics, whether you're in the city or on a farm. And in our context, in a rural context, then the farm community that Srila Prabhupada has set up is that their land and their cows and their oxen. And so how do we kind of support that? How do we support that core? Of course, great communication, whether it's word of mouth, social media, or however else we all communicate with each other. Good public relations. We've come 50 years, and I can see how the image of the Hare Krishna movement is so different. Even in our own little insular world of central Pennsylvania, people are looking at us differently. They're becoming more open, and we kind of stepping out a little more out of just our regular activities and becoming more involved in local, kind of civic activities. Research and development for us in a rural context is important because there's all this big responsibility of caring for natural resources, and not all of us are trained in that. So how do we go about doing that? And that may happen in any context too. You don't understand something, you research and you develop that further. Setting up the infrastructure, buildings, plans, developments, future planning, and then a big one is governance and compliance. Whether you're trying to erect something in the city or produce food that has to cross the state line, there's always governance and compliance the moment you go to market. So we call that model the method behind the madness. It's kind of, so when we're doing too many things, we kind of zoom in and we can focus, and then we realize why we're doing this. And as Dhruva mentioned earlier, the bottom line is we're wanting to live simply so we can have more time to chant Hare Krishna. And that's the bottom line for all of us in all of our endeavors. Re-establishing that lost relationship with Krishna. Okay, and so these are just some images about the different elements. And so that's what a rural community can offer. And there's more. There's a whole lot more we could be doing for all of you. So just some glimpses into that. And so these are just some direct statements from Prabhupada about cows. And so, when we looked at the state of the world, it's very clear why it is that way. The mass cow slaughter and the warfare and the refugees and so how do we bring this simplicity back into our lives? When we start to understand how the simple living is very different to modern farming techniques, realize that there's some choices we may have to make. There's some things that we have to do differently, even those of us that reside in the cities. And these are just some facts. Everyone talks about the shortage of water and natural resource shortages, but it's due to livestock production. You probably all watched or may have watched Cowspiracy. Okay, so if you get to, that's a great documentary to watch. It just goes right into the root cause of the planet's difficulties environmentally. It's
What's it
because of the
called?
life. C-O-W, Cowspiracy. Instead of conspiracy, cowspiracy.
Yeah, I think it's a paid thing now. I got a stick.
So essentially what we understand from this is that the rainforest is taken down for extra grazing. That means habitats are lost. That means species are becoming endangered on a daily basis. Thousands of gallons of water are being used for meat production, and people don't have drinking water in many parts of the world. The lands are overgrazed. We're growing more feed than food. We're growing feed to feed the bull and the cow, to slaughter that to produce meat. The fuels are impacted. The cows are being fed fish, so the oceans are being depleted. And so there's just a whole ripple effect, and this very nicely explains the real impact. So it doesn't talk about, just only greenhouse effect and all sorts of things. It really goes down to cow slaughter. That is the root cause. So how do we make an impact? Let us make an impact now by our choices and decisions. We understand that protecting cows is an important component of protecting the earth. It's not just those of us who live in rural communities, yay, cow protection, and then those of us who live in cities, yes, book distribution. No, all of it goes on. Everything is significant. We all just hone in on different areas of specialization in our services. We specialize on helping the grihastas. We specialize on counseling. We specialize, dealing with Sankirtan devotees and supporting them in their efforts, and Harinam programs, and then there are rural programs and farm communities. And so there's a spectrum, deity worship training. There's a whole spectrum. So everything needs to happen. So let us collaborate, cities with farms, farms with cities, we need together, and let us come together for a simpler and more natural way of life so that we can have more time to chant Hare Krishna. I mean, above everything else, at the end of the day, although I sometimes think on the farm how we have all these deadlines and this retreat is happening and the place needs to look like this and I have this administrative compliance report due, or, there's such a spectrum, or, the Damodar needs to be worshipped and bathed and he's offering, and the cows need to be tended to, and the land, before the rain comes, the hay needs to be harvested. At the end of it, all of our endeavors are simply to please Krishna.
Krishna.
Last words?
So thank you very much. This is good. Any comments?
Yeah. Let me just. We're running behind schedule slightly, little more than slightly, and the schedule says we're gonna. I'm going to look for a hand raise about who can stay a little bit longer so we can extend the schedule so we don't. So, according to the schedule, they finished at 4:30. And then Lokadaksha and Vidarbha Sutta are going to speak on book distribution for 1 hour, from 4:30 to 5:30. So we planned the schedule so that everyone could make it to wherever they have to go next, Radha Govinda Mandir if you're from New York, or back to wherever you came from. So how flexible are you to stay an extra 15, 20 minutes? Is there anyone that's difficult? 15, 20 minutes, difficult? For those of you that is difficult, maybe what we'll do is we'll just take about 3 or 4 questions, something like that. Quick break, set up, and then reconvene, and you take an hour. How's that? Loka? Okay. So we'll take some questions, 3 or 4 questions if there are any comments.
That's true.
Hare Krishna. I think it's a really sweet and edifying presentation. My question is, I was just wondering how it works for devotees who are doing farming service at the farm. How does one where does sadhana fit in? Because doesn't farming require working on the farm when temple regular temple devotees that's their time for chanting. So how does that work?
Yeah, so of course, we're trying to engage devotees according to their propensities. And yes, according to the propensity, if someone likes to milk the cows, then we have to make some adjustment in the schedule. So, it wouldn't be compulsory for them to attend in the morning, the full morning program, so to speak. So we're trying to juggle things. We, haven't perfected things as yet, but we're trying to juggle things according to devotees' natures and what they like to do. So for those devotees that are milking cows in the morning, they'd be able to chant, after 9 or 10 o'clock and find the slot. So pretty much we let devotees at least, manage their schedules for the most part of it. Of course, there's fixed, regular things that need to be done. There's some group activities that need to be done. There's, growth workshops that we do once a week. There's so many nice things that we do. But so pretty much we let devotees work on their schedule.
Well, there's Prabhupada gave a good answer to that.
Mhm.
So this person asked Prabhupada, it was, I believe, a parent of a devotee, but it was a non-devotee, who was a little skeptical about our Krishna Conscious program. So he goes, well, if you're all chanting Hare Krishna, who's gonna milk the cows? Prabhupada looked at him and smiled. We will milk the cows. And he went like this: Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare.
Thank you, that's very sweet. I was thinking, so the typical temple program continues. It's just sparse, to be honest, because there's 2 people in the barn, 3 people on the altar, 2 people in the kitchen, and if the land is being cultivated, the best time to go about is 80 degrees between 11 and 4. Then we go out very early, so there's probably 2 people there, and we only have like 9 volunteers on the farm. So the Bhagavatam class will be the speaker maybe to the wall sometimes. Those of us on the altar dressing here. So if there is a huge community, it can be more enlivening. But that's the reality right now. We hope that it can shift.
So how does it work in that huger community? I guess I think I was thinking more like that. Obviously, it's different when you have a small crew and you're trying to build something. Then you do the needful. I was kind of wondering because you were part of your emphasis in your classes. The simple living, high thinking. We're focusing on the farm, so we have more time for chanting. So what you're working for, let's say when you get the result and you have this fully functioning, sustainable community, then how does it work?
When I went to Hungary for Srila Maharaj's project there, the devotees do it very, very nicely. It depends, what day it is of the year, and they customize practically on a day-to-day basis the program. So sometimes if it's harvest season, the classes would be shorter. Srila Maharaj would give, a 10-15 minute class, and everybody would go out to do harvest. And in this way, they build in the time for japa in the morning, 5 o'clock to 6:30, and everybody goes out at 6:30 and does harvesting. Of course, the cooks are still cooking. So it works really nicely in a big community. And of course, everyone's got a common goal. There's the deities, but then there's also the practicalities of running a operational farm. So it works really, really nicely. Very, very wonderfully.
Thank you.
I have a quick comment, not so much a question. In middle of May, we had a little gathering in Milan, and that's when I also found out from Madhuseva that his wife had done the personal translating for Prabhupada. But Guranga from Govardhaneko village was there, and he said he had just visited New Rajadam, and I said, what was your experience? And he's very succinct. He said, fantastic stewardship of resources. So I was thinking responsibility, but responsible stewardship. That stewardship has has strong connotation, at least in America. I don't know elsewhere, but he used the word, and it seems like to develop the vision. It's not just hands in the soil. It's a lot of intelligent planning. You said it, but it just emphasizing. And I think that's, at least from my discussions with Deva Amrita Maharaj, he appreciates that resource that both of you bring to Gita Nagari that wasn't so much there before, like people that were enthusiastic or whatever. But you have the combination of those two. A willingness to do the needful, and a lot of capacity to carefully consider. So you're inspired because there's a vision that you're fulfilling, and you know how to get from the next step to the next step. I appreciate these two. Just responsible stewardship.
So anything else?
Just speak loudly.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Well, I just first of all want to appreciate both of you guys so much. You're such an amazing inspiration to me. Like Maharaj was saying, like willingness to do the needful, and also just an inspiring couple. Period.
She's signing up. Volunteer group.
Thank you for the example that you set and all of that. I actually want to ask a question, and I hope that it's not too controversial, but it's just for kind of my own understanding, so it's a sincere question. You had mentioned earlier the film Cowspiracy,
Yes.
and I thought that was so interesting based on the service that both of you, that you do, that you've kind of dedicated your lives to. And I was wondering if you could kind of speak to what I kind of feel was like the take-home message of Cowspiracy, which was animal agriculture being such a root cause to the devastation of this planet. So that being on one hand, and then on the other hand, Srila Prabhupada's desire for cow protection and how that's also needed. So just kind of reconciling the two, and just being able to just even to explain to the outer world, like why I'm personally, for example, not a vegan, and if that is actually contributing to the whole system. And so I was just wondering if you could just speak to that kind of worldview.
The key difference, thank you for that question. The key difference is scale. The magnitude of farming. One is factory farming, and that is what is causing the effects. The model that Prabhupada gives us is not a volume-based factory farming style. Even what the Mennonites and the Amish and the old order folks and the original farmers that were bought over by corporates followed. I can't remember the statistics, but before, for a family farm to remain sustainable, they had to keep a herd of a maximum about 80 cows. That same family farm now, because of the system, the compliance and the governance around it, has to keep a herd of 300 cows.
Wow.
And so the whole game changes. Infrastructure, economics, everything changes. Seed for feed crops, the soil and how it's maintained and fertilized, to how the animals are milked and processed. And so it all comes down to scale. And so this model, in terms of milk from protected cows, and the farming model that Prabhupada has given us, is a small to medium scale model that people all over, the academics and everybody are realizing, the scientists, that's the only sustainable model. Because right now the corporate farms are just monoculture farms. They're growing masses of soybean or masses of corn, or even if it's your vegetables, they're growing masses of tomatoes or ginger or whatever. I mean, most things in the store are from China. I don't know what America grows anymore. And all these beautiful farms in rolling Pennsylvania and the other rural states, they're actually just feed crop farms. You don't see vegetable food farms anymore.
Yeah.
And that's the difference. And those farmers, and we know many of them as friends, because they are mentors in some ways for agriculture. And they're actually just caught in a system. They just squeeze. They actually have great family values, although their diets are different, obviously. That makes a big difference too. But apart from that, they're just caught in a system. The farmer gets about $1.50 for the 1 gallon of milk he produces. But that 1 gallon costs him a lot more. So when he gets his income, and he supplies his milk to a co-op. So if he supplies a certain amount of milk to a co-op, and he gets maybe $18,000 a month for that, and his expenses and his bills come to $26,000, he's thinking, well, how do I do this? Because it costs him a lot more to produce that milk, although he's only getting $1.50 for it. And how does he do it? He says, well, I have to, make up that difference. I'll just take my weakest cows and I'll send those cows to market. So the beef industry subsidizes the dairy industry. So the whole issue of the cowspiracy is scale. The factory farms in Texas, there's horrific, visuals of those. And even for vegetables, I mean, those of us becoming vegan, those people becoming vegan, you drink almond milk. So what do the corporates do? They follow the trends of the consumer. So they're going to South America and destroying forests to grow almonds. Where does it end? So then everyone's, because the consumer's drinking almond milk, so it still doesn't solve the problem. Therefore, we have to come back to the simple living, to the small to medium farms. Because everything becomes corporatized. Everything, no matter what trend there is. So, what Prabhupada's given us is really revolutionary, because we come back to sustainability.
So yeah, I mean, just one quick example was that, I tried to apply for some grant funding to produce methane, because we've got cow dung on the farm. One of the products that, as it degrades, is it produces methane. And so I made some inquiries with the USDA, and they said, no, it doesn't work. So what do you mean it doesn't work? I know my ancestors are from India, and everybody that's got 1 or 2 cows, that's how they cook. They use methane from the cow dung. And she said, no, it doesn't work. So of course she went back and did some research, and she was saying that unless you got 900 cows, then it works. So anyway, I was a little determined to go and find a unit. So somehow or the other we found a small unit that takes 4 pounds of cow dung and produces some methane. So of course once we started producing that, we had a small stove in the kitchen. I called the USDA one day and said, okay, please come have a look.